'Tis the season to shine with H&M. Discover the holiday collection and find fashionable pieces for your wardrobe or for under the tree. Get inspired and dazzle with this year's glam. From tuxedo styles, bow detailed pieces, impressive prints, and more. From unforgettable looks to unforgettable gifts. With fashion finds to home decor, find it all at H&M. Treat your loved ones and yourself this season. Shop in-store or at hm.com.
Bienvenidas al podcast Dos Bold Latinas. Aquí están sus hosts, Jatna Abreu
y Josibel Madera Vialets, dos latinas feministas born in Santo Domingo y in New York.
Passionate about Latina empowerment, Spanglish,
learning, growth, and so much more.
Hola mujeres, en el episodio de hoy va a ser un poquito diferente. Rosie and I just wanted to hop in this month and talk about maternity leave and what to do when you are returning to work and getting ready for that. Maybe give you some tips on how to do that. It's not gonna be so much normally we go and kind of follow a guideline. We normally have a guide where we go, intro, and then we talk about if it's an interview, then we go into the interview, and then Rosie gives her perspective and I give my perspective. And today, with this specific episode about maternity leave and returning to work and just preparing for being a working mom, we wanted this to be more conversational, where her and I give you some tips about what we did to get ready to go back to work when we were pregnant. We were both pregnant with both our children, and the difference between the two children, since our children have bigger gaps in between. So things literally for us have changed in between those pregnancies and going back to work. And so today we just want to give you some tips and also kind of share our experiences as to how we both managed to get ready for returning to work as working moms. And how, I don't know, something that maybe it helps you. And then now you can get prepared. And if you're expecting or plan to get pregnant soon and plan to continue to work and not necessarily be a stay-at-home mom, these are some things that we personally did. And we hope that it helps you. And it's a conversation that you find helpful. So, right, Rosie? So.
Yes, it's Jana, we conversate about this on WhatsApp all day, every day now, especially for Jana now that's so fresh. I was come on, this was going on in our lives. Let's just talk about it. So, I'm glad I love how we always.
Yes, I'm glad that you brought that up because I would have never, even though we find it so normal, I guess at this point we're just used to it, and we're just literally you said earlier, willing with the wheels to spin, keeping the wheels spinning, whatever. We don't really sit and think about oh, maybe I personally didn't really think being so fresh, that's a good idea that we share this, but I didn't think it would be worth sharing with you guys. But Rosie does have a point, and it's good for us to just share with you guys kind of our experiences, just because it is important, especially as Latina moms or Latina working women. So in how our lives change, period, after we have kids, and we still want to continue, our career, but also want to go back to work. So, right?
Yeah. Well, Jen, I want to start out because for you, for example, I didn't have to figure out childcare because it was my mother-in-law for my first baby, and she actually lived with us, so super blessed. And then for my second one, it was also my mother-in-law and sometimes my mom. But for you, Jana, you had to figure out, the whole childcare, taking both of your babies to childcare centers. What was your process? How far in advance? Because at work right now, Jana, there's two girls that are pregnant, and you would be surprised that we do need to share this information because they don't realize how early on they need to start doing that. Both looking for childcare and also for setting up maternity leave for work and finding out all the rules and processes and paperwork. So can you share a little bit about that?
Yes, I can.
It's fresh, so fresh for you.
It is. And so for us in our organization, so we're Rosie and I work at the same company, where what I would recommend, the way I did it, is that I obviously waited until like I felt safe to say, like I got to think about what's next, right? Like I got to think about preparing for this new baby. And so I need to let like my boss, right? She needs to know, just so that we can prep for like, okay, who's going to take over my responsibilities while I'm gone, right? And what plans can we make to ensure that, we all have time to get that done by the time I'm done, I'm out of the office for a couple of months. And then also talking to, for us, I mean, I'm assuming that's the same for other companies, where it's like talking to human resources, right? So letting them know, like that you are expecting, and that, asking questions like, okay, when do I need to let you know? When do I have to fill out paperwork? Because you do have to fill out paperwork for them to know that you are expecting, and when are you expected to, like your due date, essentially. And so personally, I did this about 4 to 5 months in advance, just because I'm one of those people. You could probably do it maybe like 3 or 2 months, in advance. But I'm one of those people, Rosie knows, I'm very
organized.
I'm very organized, and I have a plan, and I just want to make sure, for me specifically, I wanted to make sure that whenever my daughter decided to get here, I didn't have to worry about like, hey, this happened. Can you get this done? And like, be late to the process. And so I wanted that to be like taken care of and out of the way, so that when I actually had to go and have my daughter, all I needed to do was to let them know, hey, I started my leave, and that was it. And that's what happened, right? So because if you don't do that earlier, then you're caught up doing paperwork, when you're at that point where your third trimester, where you're just like, I can't, like at that point you just forget everything, and you're just like, oh. Yep. So I try to do at least 5 months in advance. And so I took care of it. I had it in the system. You fill out paperwork, you go to your doctor. I'm assuming like all the organizations where you work for may be different. But for us, like all I needed to do was like fill out the paperwork with the company that would like take care of my leave. And then they needed me to like basically back and forth work with my doctor to ensure that, my doctor signed the paperwork to ensure that everything was in and ready for them to know like, yep, she's due this day, and this is what the amount of time that she'll need. And this is kind of what like the birth plan situation, like this is what we're planning to do. Because it's different whether you have a vaginal birth, right? Or whether you have a C-section. And obviously we cannot predict what's going to happen the day of the birth. But normally you kind of know in advance though, unless, something goes sideways or whatever differently. But for me, it was normal, like a regular, right? So we were planning for like a 6-week, postpartum, with just being, just taking care of myself and the baby, and then like baby bonding essentially. But sometimes you do have to do C-sections, which takes, you need a lot more time to actually get better and heal. So that's kind of what I did. I got ready for that. And then for what Rosie mentioned, like childcare situation, right? For my first son, I had like Rosie said, like I was blessed that I had my mother-in-law taking care of Jeff for the first year of his life. So that was very helpful. We would just like, literally, like we talked to her in advance. Literally, we knew like since the moment we were pregnant, we were like, oh, she's like, she offered, she was like, I'll take care of him. And I was like, okay, that's the plan. So we worked with her. And then as soon as I, gave birth and went back to work, I was with him for 3 months at home. When I went back to work, she took care of him for the first year of his life. And then I did sign him up for a daycare, like for a big daycare. So he does go to a center. And for those kind of daycares, you do have to basically plan in advance, and you have to either go in person or just call in and see what wait is. They have like a wait list normally, depending on like the age of your child. And so at the time, my child was 1. So for him, the wait list wasn't as long. So we only waited like a couple of months before he was able to get enrolled into the daycare. And then for my daughter, was a little different because we did need like the infant phase, the infant room, like people taking care of more people in the room. So she is with other infants in the room, and that room needs a lot more people. So therefore, they need to know, like they have a list and they have a limited amount of kids that they are allowed to have in that room. So I had to put her on the waiting list when I found out that I was pregnant at 12 weeks, so 3 months. So you do have to prepare in advance. And she started daycare earlier this month. So like the first of the month. So I mean, you see, that's a long time to be on that wait list. And that's how far in advance you have to let them know. So you got to prepare for those things and make sure that you do your research. Obviously, like we went with the daycare that my son is at, just because we've had really good experience there. He's been there for 5 years now. And he's actually goes before and after school care. So we wanted for them to be together at the same center. And we decided to go with that center. But beforehand, we obviously tour different daycare centers and also looked at like in-home centers. But what sold us with this daycare was that we were able to see our son, and we're able to see my daughter on a daily, and we get updates. They have a camera in their room basically. And so we're able to see like what they're doing at any time of the day. I can just log in and hop on there and see what her day is looking like and what she's doing. And so same thing with my son at the time. And then they give you updates on whether they were fed a bottle, whether they had like a bowel movement, or they peed and they changed the diaper, or they're taking a nap, or like all those things. So they give you updates on that, which I appreciate, because I'm that type of person. Like I need to know. And then I knew that with an in-home daycare, it's a little different because you don't really get that perspective, right? Like they don't have cameras like that where you can log in and like see those things, and updates are less, like a little harder to provide to parents because they're taking care of other kids, right, at the home. So they have to make sure that they're like on top of those kids. So that I didn't, not that I didn't trust. And in-home care is just like, for me, that's what worked best, because I'm very controlling. And I kind of want to see everything that my kids are doing and be updated, so that when I get there, I'm able to know, like, oh, I see that the last bottle was like this time, that they checked her diaper at this time, and that her next bottle is at this time. So I'm prepared, and I don't have to talk to somebody specifically to let me know that, because that's already in the app essentially. And I'm able to talk to the person in the room, like the assistant or the teacher in the room, whenever I have a question. Like if I want to send them a message through the app asking them like, hey, can you check this for her? Or can you, I forgot to tell you this, or they want to tell me something like, oh, she needs diapers or whatever. Like it's a good way. The app is a good way for us to communicate. But we also talk over the phone, like if needed. But if I'm busy during the day, like I can quickly just do the app thing. So that's kind of my experience with how we chose to, arrange daycare. And it's not to say that we didn't have the same support. We did have the same support that it was offered to us, but we just felt like development wise for our kids, it was the best thing to do. And for my son, we waited a year. Of course, we did let the grandma take care of him. But for my daughter, because it's a lot closer to us, the daycare that they go to, we just decided to start from the beginning, taking her there, just because it's only 3 minutes away than like having to go out of our way and take her to the grandma who lives like 20 minutes away from us, than like 3 minutes, at the daycare, which is right here. So that's kind of how, we did it.
Yeah. And that I want to allude to, like, that's timing. Like we look at, oh, but you're saving money, but then it's like, okay, but you're also saving time, in your sanity, in your mental health, and think about what you could do in those 20 minutes. And I want to go now, that got me thinking, Jana, like pumping. Like before we go on maternity leave, we gotta think about how we're gonna, I mean, like right when we go back to work, we gotta think about if we decided if we're one of those moms that do pump or breastfeed, like what we're gonna do. And something that you've talked about, Jana, which for me, for my first son, I was obsessed with breastfeeding. And it was because one person told me I wasn't going to be able to breastfeed because I wasn't getting any milk. And it's that one thing when someone tells you you can't, and you're like, you told me
I
I
will
can't,
tell you.
then I'm going to prove to you that I can. So I was so obsessed with it. And then for my second daughter, I was like, I want to do the same thing as for my son. And for my firstborn, I was super blessed. I filled up the freezer at my house and my mom's house. And he was able to have milk till he was a year old. And then for my second, she started to drink the like leche nido, like almost when she was one, because I did run out, but I was working in corporate already and I was traveling. So I was still pumping like at work. And I would be so drained after, like people would say, you look so tired every time I walked out that room because I felt like I was getting my energy sucked out. But one of the things is like the time that goes into pumping. Like we gotta remember that you're at work and that's like your number one job while being at work, to pump. So like to me, my perspective is if you could do it, if your job has that flexibility and your mental health lets you, hey girl, do it. But Jana, like I want to hear your perspective because I really like the way you frame it, that use of how it's okay if you end up not doing it because pumping is a job and it's time consuming and it's about your mental health. So can you talk a little bit about that, like how your journey was with your second baby?
Yeah, so so like Rosie mentioned, like you get both perspectives, right? So Rosie did you know, she was blessed to be able to and made it work, right? To be able to breastfeed both her kids, right? Like for a very long time. But for me, both times actually, I was only able to do it for a limited amount of time. And I like to talk about this because I know there's a lot of moms out there that like I don't know why we do this as moms and shaming other moms, but it's like, you have to choose what's best for you and your family. And that's why you also have to think about like when you are expecting, going into that, yes, with the I guess like the mentality that, yes, I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna do my best, and hopefully, I do get to breastfeed my child for whatever 6 months to a year or whatever, however long you want to. But you also have to be realistic and think about like, okay, but if I can't, what am I gonna do, right? Like, what's my plan? And so you have to go into it with like a backup plan in case it doesn't work for you. And for me, both times didn't end up working too well, honestly. So for my son, and unfortunately, I breastfed him for 1 month, and which was fine, like yeah, I was struggling, but it hadn't gotten as hard at that point just yet because he had been just like a month is like 4 weeks. So he was still very, like a newborn still. And so then he developed acid reflux. And so we had to take him to the doctor or the pediatrician. And then that's when she told us like, hey, you're going to have to stop breastfeeding because for some reason, like, he's getting this reflux. And so your milk, it was also something about like my milk wasn't good for him, essentially. Like it was just not helping him. And so she was like, if we want to stop this, and he would get colics and he would just cry literally 24/7, unless he was sleeping. He would cry 24/7 for the first 3 months of his life. So that was very difficult for us. And I think it's one of the things that made me and my husband like wait so long to have such a big age gap also between the two kids, because we were scarred. Like we just thought that was going to happen to us again. And I just couldn't, like I still to this day, even having my daughter and going through like our, stage with her, like as a newborn and all these things, like I still feel like it was more difficult, like a lot more difficult with my son, for those first 3 months we were with him at home. Just because, like, even though I wasn't breastfeeding, like he would never be okay. Like, he would cry so much that I was just like, I don't know that I can do this again ever. So that stayed with us. And so with him at 1 month, we made the decision to just formula feed. And, pediatrician just kind of put him on a special formula. And that's what he stayed on for the next, like the whole year of his life. And that worked for us. And that was very good because, at that point, like it was difficult, the fact that he would cry all the time, but at the same time, it was easier because I didn't have to worry about to have to breastfeed him while I was unable to like soothe him because of what he was going through. So the second time, fast forward to now, I did breastfeed. Like I went in with the mentality, because in my mind I was like, oh my gosh, she's gonna have the same problem, right? Like, because you never think about like, oh, kids are different. I get that, but it's like it's still fresh. And so I thought like, oh my gosh, she's gonna have the same issue. So I have to mentally prepare myself to maybe do the same thing, right? So this time I was prepared. And then it started, I started to breastfeed at the hospital. It was going well. She was latching and all these things. And I was like, oh, maybe it's not so bad after all. And she doesn't have any issues. So I may be able to do this for a longer time. Well, fast forward to like, what? I want to say 6 weeks. I was breastfeeding like on demand, like doing, and look, you guys know, doing what you're supposed to be doing. That's like taking over your life. And so that wasn't working for me, unfortunately. And so then I was like, okay, then I would, what I'm going to do, I'm going to modify this. And because I still want her to get my milk and we don't have any issues this time. So I need to work harder at ensuring that she gets my breast milk. So I was like, okay, I'm going to modify. This is not working for me. Like the whole, like actually putting her on the breast. And then she started not wanting to latch anymore. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to start pumping. And then that took over my life too. So I would pump literally every 3 hours, like on the dot, the whole 24 hours for her to actually have, like a bottle ready. Because at that point I wasn't breastfeeding her like from the breast. And so I had help. So like my sister, when she would come over, she would help, or like my husband obviously like would help and wake up in the middle of the night and kind of help me. But the problem is that when he was helping me, when I was supposed to be sleeping and like actually resting, I had to get up to pump every 3 hours. So that wasn't helping.
So something's coming to mind. And so I remember me up at 4 a.m, at 2 a.m. I would eat ice cream. That was my motivation. So I'm just here thinking, what would you do in the middle of the night? Because that was my thing, so I could stay awake and actually just do it, because that was super hard.
It was interesting because what I would do, because like a side note, but like I was also still kind of doing still engaged for work, like at work, and kind of seeing what people were. I would go into my email and read my emails that people have sent me, or like catch up on like, like I have direct reports. So I have people that do report to me in my role. And so they, I kind of task them with like, oh, even though I'm not gonna be here, send me your like, like your updates, like maybe every other week or so, like, or whatever. So so I would read through that stuff while I was pumping in the middle of the night. Or sometimes I would get like, when I didn't really want to do that, I would get like on Instagram and like look at reels, like those videos or whatever, or just look at information, like reading stuff. I don't know, just like keeping myself like awake while I'm pumping. Yeah. So that was very rough for me. And so I, even though I wanted to push myself, it wasn't, at this point, like I also have a son who is 6 years old, and he also still needs me very, very much. And so he's a mama's boy, I'm not gonna lie. And he demands a lot, like he really is demanding. He really wants my time. And, I have to put in the time.
Especially.
Yeah.
And especially now that he's no longer the baby. or the
Exactly.
only baby. He's
So I
still
have
the
to make
baby, but I'm not the only baby.
exactly. So I still
Yeah,
have to ensure that he gets the time that he needs from me. And so that,
yeah.
breastfeeding and only being the only person that could do that for my daughter, or even pumping, like that wasn't working for me. So that was literally affecting me.
Mhm,
Also my son, because he wouldn't get the time that he wanted from me. Or every time he
mhm.
would want to be with me, then I'd be like on the, pumping, and he'd be like, okay, like,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, this is supposed to be my time, but somehow you're still doing stuff for her.
yeah.
So, it kind of made sense. So I was like, okay, this isn't working for us. And, I had a conversation. My husband's the type of man that he's very supportive. So even though like he
Yeah.
didn't really have a say on it, I still wanted to, I don't know, get his approval kind of thing. Although that makes no sense. But it's like, I also wanted him to be on board type of thing, that like, hey, I can't do this anymore. Because you've seen how hard it is on me. So like, can we just, I'm thinking that I'm going to stop and like start, putting her on formula instead. He was like, you don't have to ask me. Like, this is your body. And that, if it's
Yeah.
not working for you, you do what needs to work for you. And just for all of us. So I support you. Whatever you want to do, I support you. So that's one thing that he was super supportive. And then to not feel
Mhm.
that guilt, because I knew I was like, I'm gonna need to, like, I kept doing it. I did give myself like a deadline though. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna push myself, and I'm gonna wait until I'm gonna do it up until I have to go back to work, which I did. I did get to stop it when I said that, when I started to go back to work, just because I was like, I know I'm not gonna have, because that's the other thing, right? Yes, you will have flexibility, like, right, there's a law, right, that you are able to pump while at work and things like that, right, and that's fine. But for me specifically, that wasn't going to work. When I was like, literally, when I'm at work, the last thing that I want to think about is like, oh, I gotta block my calendar to go in here and have a pump session. Like, that just, honestly, that with my job, it just wasn't going to work for me. So I knew that was one thing that I was just like, nope, out of the picture. But I did push myself to just wait until going back to work, and like slowly started to like, save some milk for her though, so she could still have milk, breast milk, like frozen breast milk in the fridge for when I started to like, slowly stop, the pumping, and like going back to my normal, just like not doing any of that. But
Yeah.
she still had a little bit of, had like a fresh, like a stash of milk in the fridge. So we went through, so I stopped, I went back to work, and I still was able to feed her from the frozen milk. And then when I wanted to start her on formula, then I started to like do a combination of both. So I would do like, let's say it was like 4 ounces of formula that she took, or milk. I would do like 2 ounces of milk, formula, and 2 ounces of breast milk, and like slowly, do that for like, I did that for like a month, until my frozen milk was gone, and then I slowly increased the formula.
Transition. Yeah, that's a great transition strategy.
Exactly. And I mean, now we're full on formula, a formula that works for her. And again, I don't regret it. It's what works for us. And my husband, anybody that, my support system, anybody that comes here could literally not breastfeed, but can
Yeah.
literally feed my daughter
Yes.
like a bottle, right?
Yes.
So, and help me, like, hey, like, I have to
Mhm.
do something here. And so they support me. And that is honestly what works for me. And I can spend more time with my son and doing the things that he likes
Yes.
with me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm over here remembering. I'm like, I remember that my breast milk decreased, in my second baby, the whole working corporate, because it is hard. Like, yeah, we're giving the room and that we're supposed to be giving that time. But for me, I didn't want to miss out on the meeting because I'm pumping, like that's just not my mindset, because I'm like, when I'm like, Jana even knows, like, I don't even have a newborn. When we go into the office for 2 days, like, I try to not even use my personal phone, because I'm like, if I'm going to be here, I'm full on here. So, but I'm remembering something that I did. If you are someone that still wants to keep trying breastfeed, pumping and working, I didn't discover that I could pump while I drive until
Oh
my
yeah.
second baby.
Yeah. That's there's so many. So nowadays there's a
I
lot of
know.
tools that in resources
Yeah.
that you could use, like the
Yeah.
pumping, like those wireless pumping things that they sell
So
too?
I didn't own one of those. I found out there was an adapter. So the strapless, the broad thing, I had it for my firstborn, but for my secondborn, I I started like pumping on the way to work and then like on the way home. So that time I had to dedicate less time during office hours to pump. But yeah, because I remember
Oh yeah,
it was hard for me.
like Rosie's mentioned, like there's a lot of resources, honestly, and I used all of those
Yeah.
resources while I was determined to
So
breastfeed my daughter for those 3 months, 4 months, whatever. But
and
yeah, but
and while listening to you, it's like, okay, well, you thought about daycare, and then you thought about the whole pumping, and then some people make decisions like, oh, to save money, but I love how you didn't even mention that money is a part, because at the end of the day, your time with your son and your
it's
husband and
more valuable.
yourself is a lot more valuable than that. So that's something I want to, women that are expecting or know someone that's expecting, and you're talking about these struggles, that it's hard to make those decisions. Always think about that, your mental health. And I know he has those One Latinas podcasts. That's something that we strongly believe in, and that we've had multiple episodes about. So
And
as you're listening,
and
yeah.
want something that I do want to I guess mention, like a plug here, because we also talk about, when we talk about mental health and like taking care of ourselves, it's important, and you guys have heard in multiple episodes where we bring in therapists here, right? We've done this multiple times because we think this is very important, for everybody, not just women, but I mean, as women of color, right, like, or Latina women, we need to make sure that we're also asking for help, right? So for me, while I was going through that situation where, like, I was like, okay, I'm determined to do this for this long until I go back to work. At least I'm gonna do this. But before I do it, like, I need to make sure, for me specifically, honestly, I need to make sure I need to be validated. Like, I need to make sure that this is okay for me, even though it sounds very weird, honestly. And I know, but I know there are women out there that feel the same way. I just felt like I needed someone else to tell me, like, it's okay. I needed for like a professional to tell me, like, it's okay to take care of yourself. It's okay to take care of your mental health and put that first. Because if you're not well, then, and you're not, your mental health is not in the right place, like, you're not gonna be a good wife or good mom, or you know what I mean, like, at home and taking care of your loved ones. So I reached out to my therapist. So I have a therapist. And so she had been helping me through, like, a lot of things that I had gone through before. Like, another plug here. There will be an episode coming up where I will talk about pregnancy loss as well. Because I had gone through pregnancy loss previously in 2021. And so that's when I told myself, like, I need to get support and I need to get help. And so I reached out to a therapist. And so I reached out to her, coming back to this point, I reached out to her to say, hey, I need to have a conversation with you. I normally see her like on a monthly basis at this point now. But for some reason that month where I was like struggling, like, okay, I want to make this decision. This is what works for my family. This is what works for, for us, period. But I need to be validated. Like, I need her to tell me that it's okay. Don't ask me why. I just felt like I needed to feel like someone else thinks it's okay for me to do that, like an actual professional. And her as a therapist, I met with her and I was like, I'm going through this and I don't know what to do. And like, can you help me? And so she helped me so much to understand that, like, I need to put myself first. I need to take care of my mental health. I need to, self-care is very important once you have a child and once you have multiple children, because if you're not well, then everything else is just going to collapse around you. And I mean, let's be honest, Latina women specifically, or women in general, are the main caregivers, right? The main people at their home the main individuals that do everything, essentially, almost everything. Like, yeah, you can have a partner that helps you. And I'm not going to say that I don't. I do have a partner that helps me 50%. Like, it's like half and half, and he's great. But regardless, at the end of the day, as much as he helps, I'm still the main person that people go to. Like, my children will always go to me first. So, it just happens to be that way. And if I'm not taking care of myself, and putting myself first, and like, how am I going to be able to support them? How am I going to be able to be that mom to, a good mom or a healthy mom to them? So she helped me a lot. So if you feel like you're in a situation where you're like, oh, I don't know what to do. Oh, I'm struggling, or like, I just need support, reach out to a therapist. Like, get yourself a therapist, because she helped me so much to have a better understanding as to why I needed to take care of myself and do what works best for me, and basically not think about what other people want for me, or what other people think is best for you to do with your life. Like, that's not okay. So, that's my point here, that I say just make sure that you're finding help and support, because you're not alone. And the moment you go and find a therapist, they will support you and help you. And so that's what I did when I was going through that situation.
Yes, for sure. Because you don't want to be the angry mom like I am. Like Jana now tells me, like after she's back to work, she's like, Lucy, I don't know how you do this. And I'm like, that's why my house is never clean like I want it to be. That's why I'm angry a lot of times, and I just burst out because as you guys know, like I didn't really practice self-care until, we started this Dos Bo Latinas journey, because I said that I need to set an example, and I still struggle with that. Like I still struggle with self-love. I still struggle with self-care. But like I look back and I'm like, I would say, I asked myself, how the heck did I do it too? Like now I only have to go to the office twice a week. But before I would do this 5 times a week, the commute, the going to the office, then leaving. And yes, I was super blessed. My mom would cook, but I would go to my parents' store. And because my mom would cook for me, I felt like I had to get work done for her at the store. So I was still getting home 8, 9 p.m. at night to get ready for the next day and do it all over again. So like it's okay.
It's interesting because yes, I talk to Rosie. Rosie and I talk every single day, like every single day. And when I see her up, because sometimes like she texts me like at midnight or whatever, or she just like randomly tells me like, oh yeah, I was doing this, whatever. We joke that she's like in español, like una gárgola. Because she is up. Yeah, it's like she is up like until who knows when, like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, doing, just like taking care of the stuff at the house. And I'm just like over here, like she said, like, I don't know how you do it, because side note, like, so my husband, it helps me a lot, right? Like Rosie, we've talked about this before, and he basically takes care of like 50% of the stuff at home, but he had a injury not so long ago where he had to get surgery in his foot. So he technically can't do much for like, I don't know, like 2 months, 3 months, who knows? And so because of that, limits him, being able to support me and doing all these things that he usually would do for like with the kids, and getting them ready and just like, helping out in the house. And I honestly took that for granted. I was telling Rosie, I was like, I wouldn't tell him this because I don't want this to go to his head, whatever. But I was just like, oh my gosh, like I really didn't think the amount of work that he does, like I didn't think it was that much compared to what I do. But then I thought, I as I picked up on his type, like part of the work, the job that he does at home, like his responsibilities, the chores that he does, I then realized like, oh my gosh, like he actually does a lot. Like those are extra things that I now have to do. And it's just it takes me all this time and effort, and it's something that I didn't have to do before or worry about before, that I'm just like, oh man, like, and then just listening to Rosie, like actually, because she has less help, right? Listening to her, like, tell me like, oh yeah, that I do that on that, like all of that, I do that on my own, and plus the kids are like on a daily, and I'm just like, yeah, here, like baffled, like, oh my God, like, I don't know how you do it, because I'm like dying over here, and I've only been doing this for like what, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever. And so I'm just like, and you've been doing it for like a long time now, so I'm just like, props to you, girl, props to you.
Well, yeah, we all got it hard in some way, so it's okay. We get used to it. I mean, I think that's one of the things that we have to start like once we go back to work is also like it's not, I don't want to say we're not working during maternity because that's another thing. Like people would think we're not working, like, oh, you're back to work. Like
we're very much
like
a lot of work done.
Like when you're back like to your normal work career thing, like you don't have to go with a child to the bathroom. You could talk on the phone. You could check your social media. You could eat in peace. Eat your food warm. Jatna, you probably could drink your coffee warm. I drink coffee, pero like like when you're at home, like it's none of that. You don't have none of. It's not like I don't want to say like freedom at work. It's just like it's just you know, at the office. So you can do these things because when it's a baby, you take the monitor to the bathroom if the baby's on the bed or something. Like your mind is always fine.
And you know what's funny too, that I like one of the things that when I spoke to my therapist too, like at the same time when I was having that situation, like, oh, is it okay? Like about the breastfeeding thing and like stopping it. I also told her like, hey, is it bad that I want to go back to work and have a better, like a normal routine where like I can control on a daily?
Yeah.
Just like absolutely no. Like it's okay to want to go back to the things that you once did before, or it's okay to go back to having, having control of the things that you can, what I mean, have control over. So she was like, don't feel like, because I felt so bad because I was just like, oh my gosh, like I know, like I love my daughter and like I am so blessed that she's here. And I just like, I would do anything, right? But I also want, you know what I mean? Like I also want to
the giant life.
Exactly. Like I also want to like do stuff like adult stuff, like I also want to work again. Like I'm already ready. And so she's like, nope, that's normal. That's okay. And that doesn't mean you love your kids any less. Like you, obviously that has nothing to do with that, but it's okay to feel that way. And honestly, like being back to work, I thought it would be hard, which it was for a little bit because this was like, oh man, like now someone has to take care of her and we'll spend more time with her than I do, basically like during the weekdays. But then at the same time, it felt good that I like now legit have a routine from Mondays to Fridays in which I know what's expected, right? Like, okay, in the morning we get, we do this, I drop off the kids. They're, I have this time to get my work done or do, go to meetings or do whatever I need to do, like for those kind of like almost 8 hours a day. And then I go back and pick them up, and then I can prep, I make dinner, and then we do the homeworks, and then we do the bath, and we do so all those things, like I already got the hang of those things, and I know what's expected and what's gonna happen. So it feels good. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I get it. And then I'm over here thinking I'm the opposite. Like, so for the first day when I went back to work with my second child, because it was already corporate. So the first one is different. It's working with my parents. So I didn't have that demanding stuff. There was one time my dad made me go into this long meeting and I wasn't prepared for like a 3-hour meeting with like these vendors. And I was leaking, like I wasn't wearing any breast pads and my boobs hurt. And it was horrible. But another thing, when you go back to work, take your breast pads, if for accidents, if you still have some flow. And then, but I remember the first day I was like, yeah, I'm ready to go back and I'm going to travel this weekend because there was an event coming up. And my colleague is like, you don't have to go. I'm like, no, I'm ready. Because I felt like, yes, I'm ready. I'm going, I'm not at home anymore in PJs all day. And like, I think I felt good because I was wearing like clothes and I wore a necklace and earrings.
But you know what? To your defense though, that is hard though. Like what I'm saying here is like going back to work, I said, like having a routine where like I still come back home, like I wouldn't tell you right now that I'm ready to go travel.
But espérate, listen to this. So this is me on day one, thinking I'm Superwoman. And my colleague, which we're close at work, You know her, Jana. So, and we were on the same team at that time, and she was the one covering for me. The next day I come in, oh my gosh, I can't do it. My baby was up all night. I think, and she just wanted to just be close to me. I think she just noticed I was awake because that was my first time. Like I wouldn't during maternity, I never like left her. I was the one always with her. Like, you know, I wouldn't go to a salon or to a nail place or to an appointment. Never. Like if my mother-in-law or my mom came to help me, I was still there, like at the house. And what I would do was like shower or cook or something. The next day I was a hot mess, emotionally, anxiety. Like I was like, I can't do this. So I ended up not traveling. And then like good thing for like my accounts, my closest ones were in Chicago. Like before I would like spend the night in Chicago. After my second one was born, I would drive to Chicago, come back the same day. I was exhausted, but that's so it's like that's what I was like, better they listen to what I thought like in my mind. And then I was like, well, this is my job. I have to travel. And then so it's like sometimes we feel like in our minds we could do something, but in reality, like our bodies, our emotions, and your baby tells you, like even though the baby can't talk, they do feel it. So and so I just want to say that it's okay if you're like have anxiety at work sometimes, you know, just make a list of why you like working and why you have to work maybe. And also be, you know, practice gratitude that you're lucky to have the baby and that you're able to have a job. Because I had an anxiety attack at work. And actually, Jana, your upline saw me in the bathroom. At that time, I went to a bathroom which I thought wasn't busy, but there was someone in there, and I was just bawling. I was just crying so hard because my daughter had a fever that day, and I could have not gone into work because you know I had the flexibility, but I wanted to be responsible because we had a Facebook Live recording that day. So it's like, you know, it's a live thing, so it's not like I could just miss out. But I don't know why I just got so emotional. And I'm like, and granted, like my daughters were my mother-in-law, like in great hands, but I still felt horrible because I couldn't be there. But I cried it out and then I just went on with the day and I still strive as we always do, you know. But I just want to put that out there that it's okay if you're at work and it's just having a hard day, just find someone to talk to or even cry that it's okay and you know, write down some things why, because it's also going to happen. Like we're going to have our good days or bad days.
Exactly. Like you're never
go back to that.
It's never gonna be perfect, right? Like there will be days that you're like you're killing it. You're like it's going great. It's just like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. But then there's gonna be days that you're just gonna be like, oh my gosh, like I can barely do anything today, right? And that's okay because we're not perfect and we're human beings,
right? Yeah. And earlier, and this is something irrelevant to like the going back to work, but before you go, you know, right when you give birth and you're working, make sure you add your child to insurance. Like add that to your calendar. I don't know why, like I feel hear so many stories that people forget, and I'm very forgetful. So I put that on my calendar, I put on my personal phone, on my work phone, on my calendar because I felt like I would forget because it's like something you wouldn't think about until you start going to the office and you see these emails, but no, you got to do it before your maternity leave ends, like right when the baby's born and you have the credentials for that. So yeah, I mean, basically like I kind of shared. Jana, is there anything else you wanted to talk about? Like I mean, I know we could talk about this all day, but I want to be cautious.
Yes, that we want to be cautious.
Everyone's time listening to us. I'm like, whoa, time has flew.
Yeah, so we want to make sure that you know, we're being vulnerable as usual. Like Rosie and I always try to make sure that we share like our like raw, real experiences as to you know, like our lives and what we struggle with as Latina women or just like women in general, right? And so we just want to make sure we hope that this was helpful to you and that you don't feel like you're alone, like because you're definitely not alone. Or like in the future, like Rosie said, like if you're expecting and you're still struggling, thinking about like, okay, what am I gonna do? What are my options? That you take this episode and you know just use it as as you see fit, right? And or the things that you learn or the things that you were like, oh, yep, this would apply to me. So that's what we're hoping for, that you all find this helpful to yourselves or like to other people in your life. And so that you don't have to go through, hopefully you can avoid maybe going through some of those things, or you feel like you can relate, right? That you're not alone and that you're going through the same things. And we're all going, we're fighting, just like my sister said to me the other day, like we're everyone's fighting a battle. We all have our own battles. And even though we're not like sharing that with people, it's something that you have to always keep in mind, right? Like nobody's like, life is perfect and everyone has something that they're obviously not sharing with you that they're going through. And that's important, right? So we have to be mindful of like other people and be kind to other people, because we just don't know what's going on. And the one thing that I wanted, like, again, a plug again about the topic that I spoke about, that I mentioned earlier, but it's something that the pregnancy loss portion too, like just like we talk about going back to work and like having kids and like our lives as working moms, our lives as moms, period, and having all these difficulties and like all this joy and all these things. Like there are things also in life like that we know happens a lot to other women. And so I unfortunately had experience, I had to go through that. I had to join that club, that club that nobody really wants to join. And I had, I lost a pregnancy in 2021. And I think this year, I'm ready. Rosie and I talked about this. I'm ready to share. I'm ready to talk about it. And so Rosie will take an episode this year where Rosie will interview me and I will share as much information as I can about that, just so that I can help other women out there, and so that you don't feel like you're the only person who has gone through this or that may be going through that at that point. And so we want to make sure that we're educating you and providing you with resources and information, and just like a legit, like general, a story of someone who has gone through this, right? Because we know lots of women go through this, but they don't really or necessarily share that with other women. And so I think it's very important, especially for Latinas, to share this information, because we tend to just bottle things up and not share them. And so if I can help someone else with this information and in that episode, I really hope that, it's something that you are looking forward to, so that we can all be educated together. So with that.
Awesome. Yeah. I would just say you got this. And if you're in this journey or about to, and if you're not, share it with someone, this episode that can help. Give us a rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Like, I just also another thing, Jana, like this is third year of Dos Bo Latinas.
Yeah.
On this podcast journey. So thank you so much for being with us for the past 3 years or past 3 months, whatever it is. But thank you to you guys. And hopefully you help us keep growing by rating us on Apple and Spotify podcasts. So muchas gracias. Hasta la próxima. Stay tuned for this episode that Jana will be doing, pouring out her heart pretty soon. And yeah, so
take care.